touching foods and liquids prior to washing hands. What is the background of this prohibition? And what is the law if someone went ahead and touched the food prior to washing hands? What is the law if children or a Gentile touch foods prior to washing hands? Does the food remain edible? So the source for washing hands in the morning prior to touching any food or drink is brought in the Gemara as part of the list of things that one may not do prior to washing due to danger, due to the Ruach Ra, the evil spirit that resides on the hands, and is recorded in the Shulchan Aruch in chapter 1 and chapter 4. In the words of the Alter Rebbe, it goes without saying that one must be very careful not to touch any food or drink prior to washing in order not to contaminate it to build an impurity in the food. Women must be especially warned regarding this, as the majority of the food preparations are done by them, says the Alter Rebbe, both in the Basra and in the Siddur. A guy, does one have to avoid or prevent a Gentile, such as a maid, from touching food prior to washing hands? So the Alter Rebbe writes in 4.2 that there is no need to beware from a Gentile touching some food or drink prior to washing hands after they awaken, and the reason is because the evil spirit does not reside on the hands of a Gentile, and it only resides on the hands of a Jew. On that same note, the Alter Rebbe states that it is a custom to be lenient regarding food that is touched by children after they awaken prior to washing hands if the child is below the age of chinuch. The Alter Rebbe explains that it's not necessary to avoid or prevent children below the age of chinuch from touching foods or drinks prior to washing hands. The reason for this is, the Alter Rebbe explains as follows. The only reason why the impure spirit, which is called Bas Melech, is contracted onto the person that is sleeping is because it comes to nurture from the holiness contained within that person. Meaning that a Jew that has a godly soul has what to give, has what Klippa can nurture from. And therefore, when the godly soul leaves at night, the Klippas, the evil spirit, comes into the body and nurtures from the remnants of the godly soul. However, a child that is below the age of chinuch has not yet begun to receive his godly soul. And similarly, a Gentile does not have a godly soul, and therefore the Klippas, the Ruach Ra, has nothing to look for there, and they don't come into them. And therefore, there is no worry of them touching these foods. However, once a Jewish child has reached the age of chinuch, then the godly soul begins to enter into the child, and therefore one must beware from allowing him or her to touch food or drink prior to washing hands after awakening if they have reached the age of chinuch. The Alter Rebbe continues and says furthermore, the one who is careful to beware from allowing a child to touch fruits from the day of his circumcision and onwards is doing an act of holiness. Kadesh Yemarloi is doing a holy thing. And the Alter Rebbe explains because in truth, the beginning of the entrance of the godly soul of a Jew is at the time of the bris, and more so at the time when he reaches the age of chinuch, and it's only finalized by his bar mitzvah. But since it already begins, essentially, from the day of the bris and onwards, Alter Rebbe says the one who is careful to prevent children from touching foods from this point and onwards, meaning from the point of a boy's bar mitzvah and onwards, Kadesh Yemarloi, that he is doing an act of holiness. This is all with regards to the halacha of whether children are to have their hands washed prior to washing foods. Regarding Bechlal, from what age one should start doing negovash to children, this we will discuss in a separate halacha. Also, what is the law if an adult or a child above the age of chinuch, which for sure has impurity on his hands, went ahead and touched foods prior to washing, may one eat the food or not? We will discuss in a separate halacha.